So good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we allowed the last few folks to register and come in. My name is Paul Richards, and I'm the superintendent of the American School of Dubai. And we're really pleased that you took time this morning to come and spend the morning with us over here. We have several members of our administrative team in the back. They're hiding back there, so don't look at them. There they are. You'll have a chance to meet some of them over the course of this morning based on which topics or workshops you go to see. So this morning really is meant to kind of kick us off, and I wanted to make sure I didn't just kind of give you a laundry list of the things that we do. I think a lot of that's on the website. You'll hear more of that today. I want to give you a sense of what we're working on. American School of Dubai is a place that has very high expectations for itself. Yes, we work with KHDA, we work with the Middle States Association for our accreditation, but we set the highest bar ourselves. So I'm going to explain a bit of what we're doing to make this the best possible school it can be. You'll have to bear with me a little bit. I'm just off a plane from Boston, so if I space out a little bit, you'll know why. And we'll have a chance in about 20 minutes or so for some questions. This is our second year at the American School of Dubai, our sixth year in the region. We have two children, Camille's 17 and Zach's 15. So we have the full ASD experience here, and it's been fantastic. So I want to start with just kind of a slide. I see many students here today, which is wonderful. We have a nice mixed crowd today. This generation, Generation Z, is a very unique generation in that where we went through school in a very different kind of environment. Maybe a different school environment, certainly a different context with what the job market looks like out there and what it requires, where we might have had 3 to 4 different jobs in our lives. Your children could have 3 to 4 different careers. Things are moving really, really quickly. So this is a little hard to see. We'll make this PowerPoint available. But I'll point out a couple things. You see this different life stages. You know, when we had childhood, and then we were a teenager, and then we went into adulthood in our late teens or early 20s. But you see there are many more categories now that psychologists have expressed. We've got this tween category between childhood and teenager, young adults. Adulthood, you see, happens perhaps much later. There's this interesting stage called kippers, which is, have you heard that before? No, I don't. Okay, well, you want to pay attention to this acronym. Kids in parents' pockets eroding retirement savings. So, you know, if you look at the demographic of 20-year-old to 39-year-olds, this is the first time there was a tipping point or a milestone last year where more people in that category were living at home by choice versus living at home because they needed to, because they couldn't afford a place of their own, or were living out on their own. So just think of that. The majority of people in those age groups are living at home by choice. Anyways, that's not really what we're here to talk about, but you see all these different jobs, which I'll get to in a second. So you see many moving pieces, requires quite a bit of adaptability. But I want to start with our mission, and there's a lot in here. Let me unpack this for you. The mission is really our purpose. Why do we exist as an international American school? We're here to challenge. Every student needs to be challenged. Not just those who may need extra support, but those who we want to make sure have no glass ceilings above them. And we want to inspire them, and it's perfectly okay at American School of Dubai to have dreams and to want to shoot towards those, even if you're not quite sure exactly what you want. But what we're really hoping for is preparing your children to become passionate learners, to be self-directed learners, to have agency in their own learning, so that they can go and adapt and contribute in this really rapidly changing world. Rapidly changing world because of technology, because of the flat kind of global economy, meaning interconnected global economy. So in order to be able to adapt, and that's a key word we'll revisit this morning, children need to know themselves. They need to be challenged. They need to understand what they're good at and what they need to work on to get better at. And really it comes down to this slogan, every single student future ready. The challenge, of course, is this is a very different context than when we went through. So it's preparing them for their future, not necessarily what we were prepared for. And you can't talk about the mission without the core values. You see them on the wall here to my right, and here they are. So the core values are how we do business at ASD. How we do business is as important, if not more important, than what we're doing. And we're not just modeling these, we're teaching these, we're assessing these. We're holding ourselves to a high standard with these and unpacking to see what they exactly mean. What does it mean at the elementary school versus at the high school? So we had the pleasure of listening to the president of the National Association of Independent Schools, Donna Oram, speak to our regional leadership group this past October, and she spoke to the third education revolution. This is something that she's been hitting the road with. And really the first revolution was back at the turn of the 20th century, and that was when high schools became available for everybody. So public high schools, you could get off of the farm and you could go to high school, and then that would lead to university, which was the second big revolution. So middle of the 20th century, university became accessible for your average person. Now, the third education revolution is this idea of continuous learning, where it's not just enough to go to high school, get into the workforce, maybe not enough to even just go to college and go out into the workforce, but you have to continuously learn. So thinking about education as something that's very fluid and very dynamic, that we do right until the point where we retire. And of course, the drivers of this is the rise of automation, of smart machines, of AI, machines doing the jobs that for a long time humans were doing. And this idea that the full-time employee is starting to become less frequent than the small projects or part-time work or episodic work. And again, this is just the reality that we're seeing out there. So you end up having these interesting visuals created where you have a part that's done by machines. So you see things like computation, basic language translations, recognizing patterns, basic logic, data. And then you have this side, which is the human piece. Things that, in theory, humans should be better at doing machines. So solving complex problems, putting judgment on things. What does this mean? Interpreting ethics, persuading people to do something. There was just an article yesterday, I think it was in the New York Times, around, it's basically the title was, "Behind every machine there is a human." So what is a human doing? That's the question. That's what we think a lot about here at ASD. Is what can we help prepare your children for so that they are the human behind the machine. So it's no longer machines are doing this, humans are doing that. They're working together. Okay? So we're working with machines, and your children will be getting more and more experience working with machines, doing that human part while the machines do their part. This is, I see the expression on your face. This is really revolutionary. This has huge implications for what we do. So if machines are doing computation, that implies a lot less time or emphasis on computation when it comes to math. That doesn't mean we're going to put less emphasis on math, but we're going to be looking at math a bit differently than we have before. So as I mentioned, whereas content used to be the big driver, meaning you had to just march yourself through the curriculum and learn a whole bunch of facts, what's much more important now are skills. So it's not so much what are you studying, but what are the skills you're developing as you go through everything from K1 right up through graduation. And this idea of adaptability. So you've heard about IQ, which is intelligence quotient. We all took those tests, and it would tell you, how smart you were, which is kind of a silly measure. And then there was something called EQ, emotional intelligence, where you could measure your ability to be self-aware, or to work in groups, or things like that. Well, now there's a term called AQ, which many futurists are saying is the most important skill set, and that's the ability to adapt. So something changes, you're able to adapt, learn a new skill, figure out how to work within a different culture, work with a different team, and then you're going to have a value. You're going to have a value in society. And this idea that a lot of it has to become self-directed. You may have a very small amount of time to learn how to do a little bit of coding, for example, before you can do your part on a team. And social emotional skills and competencies are as important, if not more important than ever, because that human side is where we need to do our part on the social piece. And what about university? I get this question all the time. Really, and I thought Donna put it perfectly, university needs to be something that fits within your child's vision of what they're looking for, what their own personal mission is, what they want to do in life. So there's certainly, college and university will always, I think, for the foreseeable future, be a very viable option for the majority of people. But if there are students who are ready to go out into the workforce, and there are many, there are millions of unfilled tech jobs that need people right away, ASD wants to be able to provide that opportunity. So if college is in your future, absolutely, we'll prepare you for that. If something else is in your future, we want to prepare you for that as well. So I mentioned, I wanted to talk about kind of what we're working on, but in the bigger context, there are 3 shifts in education that you should know about. This is a really challenging time for schools, and any school that stands in front of you and says, oh, it's just kind of business as usual, we want to do a little more innovating, things like that, they're really either being disingenuous or they're missing what's happening in education. So the first is the role of the teacher, and I'm going to unpack each one of these in a moment. And then this idea of how much should you learn versus which skills should you develop. And then this idea of relevancy. So the role of the teacher. Forever, teachers would stand up kind of like I'm doing right now, and they would lecture to the class. You'd take notes. Maybe you'd be allowed to ask questions. Maybe you wouldn't. But it was a very passive situation you were in where you were just taking in content, hoping to remember. And as research on this type of learning has become pretty definitive, we learn we retain between 5 and 20% of what we hear. So think about that. All that time you did sitting in class, listening to the teacher talk to you, you've retained about 5 to 10, 20% if you're lucky. And that's just like a month later. That's not several years later. So away from the teacher being the center of attention, just speaking to students, to where the teacher is more of a coach, more of a facilitator, creating the conditions so that students can discover themselves, so that they can learn. So where learning is driven by the students, because the students are owning their own education. Where students are working harder than the teacher, meaning that they're much more active, and the teacher's on the periphery, making sure that they're getting feedback, they're making sure everyone's engaged, they're making adjustments to the lesson. Is there still going to be some teaching where the teacher's up front? Yes, but it's much less than it used to be. Second shift is around content and skills. So as I mentioned, memorizing a whole bunch of stuff that will soon be forgotten, where you just march through every battle of the Civil War or every piece of European history, because one, we don't need that anymore. It's on the internet, and it's as simple as that. One of the things we tell teachers, or we ask teachers, is for them not to try to outdo the internet, because it's there, and students know how to find it. In fact, if you watch your own children learn at home, what are they doing? They're going on YouTube, right? They want to learn something, they go on YouTube. Now, they may be telling you, I'm on YouTube, but you might want to check. Make sure they're actually learning on YouTube. But whether you want to tie a knot or learn how to play a guitar or figure out how to solve for X because you didn't quite catch it in class, it's already up there. It's on YouTube. So that has implications around what we should be doing. We should not be up here just spending all of our time telling you the facts that we know as a teacher. So it's these skills. Classical skills, meaning skills that have been relevant for thousands of years: communication, reading, some basic computation, but also new skills like understanding how to work across cultures, understanding how machines learn, programming machines, ICT skills. And then these social emotional skills and dispositions like curiosity. Because these are things that are going to be really, really hard to automate. And then finally, relevancy. For a long, long time, over 100 years ago, 10 white men got in a room and they decided we're going to have these subjects. We're going to call them social studies and science and math. We're going to put them in there, and you're going to have to take a certain amount of credits, and then if you do that, you'll get a degree, and then you can go off into the world and they'll have a sense of what you can do. But we're still organized that way. We still have this Victorian model of grouping students by age, moving them through a timetable, having certain subjects. Bless you. We need to tear that down because it's not going to serve us well. Because the world out there is transdisciplinary. You don't go out there and you say, okay, now I'm going to use my social studies skills. Okay, everything's mixed up. So we are starting to expose our students to these really complex problems that go right across the different boundaries. And even the college-focused model, like I mentioned, making sure that if college is not maybe the immediate focus, maybe that's further down the road, that you have that ability to do that. So where we're headed, we're already creating new courses, new units, new lessons, where we're taking these subjects and in some cases just tearing them apart, but in other cases putting them together. So something like biotechnology, or studying more AI or nanotechnology. These are the future subjects of places like the American School of Dubai, because that is the relevancy. Any school, again, that says, why are many universities having a really hard time? Some are going out of business, some are combining. It's relevancy. They're not providing your children or your college-age children what they need so they can put this pretty significant investment and then go out into the world and find a job. So this, of course, goes right down to schools like us. For any school to think that there's not a relevancy crisis, again, have the blinders on. So we take this being relevant to you very, very seriously. So that kind of leads me to the last part here, and that is, what are we doing as far as our strategic initiatives? And about two and a half years ago, the community came together and identified three threads. The first one is looking at what we measure, making sure that we are measuring not just the things that are easy to measure, but some of the more difficult ones, like our core values, or like a disposition such as critical thinking or curiosity. So we're looking at both expanding what we measure, how we respond to that, and what do we report out to you. So you'll see a report. If you haven't seen one of our, what were once called report cards, they look a lot different. They're based on standards, many different standards, so it's not just distilled down to one letter grade. But we're measuring certain standards, we're reporting it back to you, and most importantly, teachers are taking that information and making adjustments. So rather than that test at the end of a course, there are many more assessments, we call them formative assessments, that happen right throughout the year. We're also going to be releasing our first performance report as a school. So again, what are the standards we hold ourselves to? How are we doing against our mission, which will go far beyond what KHDA produces? So the second one's around inclusion, being a more inclusive school, which is a Dubai-wide initiative, but also something that international schools really need to get better at, and that is meeting students where they are, understanding that every student has their own learning profile and have different learning differences. So whether you need extra support or you need acceleration or you need some special targeted support, we're becoming a much more inclusive school. And then finally, recognizing this amazing resources we have, this amazing facility we have, but contributing. So contributing, learning through service. There are many opportunities, of course, here, but abroad that our students partake in. We want to make a stronger commitment to not only giving back, but learning through that process. So we went through these, we had these three threads. but it wasn't enough for us. We felt there was something missing. So we conceptualized this idea of pathways, or really what we're calling personalized and relevant learning. So personalized learning where you could have a passion or an interest, maybe it's business and entrepreneurship, and we would create opportunities through, right from elementary school, right through high school, to foster this interest or develop skills in these areas. So you see tech and innovation, this idea of global and internationalism. We're just launching our global center this month. But you also see things like language and art. So we're going to give students the opportunity, maybe it's like 20% of their experience, where they can personalize it to something they're more interested in. And then the last thing I want to share is this around master planning. So we've contracted with Fielding Air International, who you may or may not have heard of. They are the leading architects of schools in the world, and they're helping us redesign this campus. So you heard me mention this amazing campus we have. It's 10 years old. We're already starting to rethink quite dramatically how we want to use space. Because right now, things are in silos. Teachers have their own classrooms. We have a lot of common spaces. But we want to create communities within the school. So they're looking at things. This is our whole campus plan right here. It's a little hard to see, but you can see this idea of a creative spine, they're calling it, where this whole kind of perpendicular part of ASD will be devoted to innovation and creativity and design and things like that. But also opportunities to put discovery all throughout the campus. And then we're really excited in 2020, we will be opening an early learning center like you haven't seen in Dubai yet. So this would be for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. It's a Reggio Emilia-inspired space, which basically is everything centered around the child and discovery and community and flexibility. And you'll see some really unique learning spaces. So we're really excited about what we're doing with space. Why are we spending so much attention to space when we have a nice facility like this? Because space dramatically impacts teaching. So if we have a classroom downstairs with just over the spring break this last couple of weeks. We took, it was basically a classroom, 2 classrooms with a dividing wall. We took out half the wall. So now there are 2 classrooms, 1 space, 2 teachers, 2 TAs, but you have this opportunity where they can come together for some of the day. And that's going to have a profound impact on teaching, and we're taking that idea and putting it all through the campus over the next several years. So again, getting students together, mixing up the environment. Okay. I think I've spoken about as long as I can speak, and as long as you can hear and listen to. So I want to open it up just for a few minutes for any questions that you have, any comments you have. And I would ask that you may have a really narrow question that we can answer for you after we're done with this big presentation or later this morning. But if you have something that might be germane to the entire group, or just even a comment, I'm happy to take those questions now. Who's brave enough to ask the first question or make the first comment? Yes.
I have a general question. It's probably going to be hard for you to answer unbiasedly.
Sure.
But coming from the U.S., or for listeners who are familiar with a range of schools, from the not so great public schools to the top public schools in great communities to the not so great private schools and up. Where would ASD?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So I was in public schools for 15 years in the Boston area at some of the very best public schools. Last 10 years have been in international schools. Schools like ASD I always call them a hybrid. So we take really the very best of the private and the public school models. When you look at public schools and you look at their commitment to standards, their commitment to the curriculum, they're really the best of what's happening in American education. We take that. When you look at independent schools and the class sizes and all the opportunities that we have and the travel that we do, we take the best of what private schools are able to offer. We put them together, and you've got some place like the American School of Dubai. So many of our teachers have come from public schools, some have come from independent schools. Many of our families are coming. This might be their very first independent school experience, but it's not going to feel like a New England boarding school or a place like that, and I would say that's a good thing. We're a day school. You'll feel very comfortable whether you're coming right from the States, any type of school. You'll see a little bit of both. The great thing about our position is we work with the Dubai government and KHDA, but we have much more freedom as far as not having the high-stakes test or not being caught up in a lot of litigation like we were back in the States. So we have really the ideal situation to do what we want for your children and focus really on. When I went overseas 10 years ago, I felt I was getting back to really why I got into leadership and why I got into education. So I look at it as the best of both worlds. Yeah.
So the plan sounds fabulous. I would be interested to know how you're going to achieve that specifically with teachers, because a lot of the teachers have come out of the education system from the past, and it seems to be something that a lot of schools are facing now. So how are you going to
It's one of the central questions our leadership team tackles, because you're absolutely right. Teachers is where the action is. They're the ones who are educating your children. So we will go as far as our teachers can tell us. And I'll tell you a couple things about our teachers. We recruit very competitively with a specific demographic of teachers. So I feel we have the best teachers in Dubai. We compete against the other big American schools, the Singapores, Hong Kong, London, for these same teachers. Teachers kind of tend to move around schools like ours. We go to the States. We try to find the best teachers over there as well. And the reason they come here, because the Middle East or the desert or for whatever is not always their top choice. ASD is known for its professional development, for its learning. So we put a lot of time and emphasis into developing a teacher, and that's what we sell actually. We say you can come here, Dubai is a really interesting place, there's a lot to do, but you're going to become a better teacher if you commit to ASD. So every week there's a lot going on for teachers to become better teachers. So we recognize that. We don't really broadcast a lot of this publicly, but internally, everything we do is oriented in helping a teacher get from point A to point B. So those shifts in the role of the teacher and the content versus skills, this is what we talk about to them and with them, and have lots of workshops. We bring the best consultants from the world into here. We have a lot of time set aside. But you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. It's all about the teachers. We have amazing teachers here. Yes?
I have a question about your approach for pre-K and PG students. So I find it's quite amazing because, you told the practice for kids. But what will happen to them like in grade 1? Are you going to think that it's going to be a sort of transition of the way you teach them in the class?
So the question is, this looks great, but what happens when they go to grade 1 or grade 2 and beyond? Again, this is a question we spend a lot of time working on. So as we are now building this, just right on the other side of the wall over there, we are redesigning what grade 1 looks like. We're redesigning some aspects of the middle school and the high school as well. So we're working with Fielding there on the entire school, knowing that we don't want to take such a open and creative space like that and then put them back into boxes. So it's going to take a little time, but I would say in the next few years, it'll look quite differently than what you walk around and see today. So we recognize that point as well. Great question. Yes?
At what age do you introduce technology in the classroom, like iPads? And what's the role of technology?
I think K1. Yeah, no, so the role of technology, it's another really important question. And I think we're starting, so, the pendulum swung to where there was so much technology available, and a lot of schools, especially well-resourced schools, just flooded their classrooms with technology, and that was too much. So the pendulum's swinging back to the point where we're very thoughtful of when technology is introduced. So at the elementary ages, you'll see iPads. You'll see perhaps some displays where they spend a little bit of time working with an interactive whiteboard, but it's mainly handheld technology. Very deliberate about how much time is spent. And once they get to middle school, we do introduce the one-to-one laptop program where students bring in their Macintoshes. And then again, the teachers are very deliberate about how to use that. We spend a lot of time thinking about screen time, what we're doing here in school versus what they might be doing back at home. We're very mindful of that. But technology to us is both a skill, there are certain skills that you can use, but also a tool. We're only going to introduce technology as a tool if it has a utility, if it has a purpose. But there are also certain skills like coding. So coding is being worked on in the kindergarten. So there's some really interesting programs like Scratch through the iPad where students can practice their coding. And then as they get through to the older ages, we have upper elementary school kids programming robots, these little spheros that move around. So that goes right through to the older ages where they're doing much more advanced things. But we're trying to find that balance. And again, schools are still trying to figure this out. We haven't nailed it quite yet. All I can say is we're really mindful about too much. So, yes.
Very good presentation, by the way. Our kids are a little older, and I'm curious about the dedicated resources that you have for college placement, specifically in, back in U.S. colleges.
Yeah.
And when I say dedicated, as in really dedicated, not just part-time person, et cetera.
Yeah, there are three main aspects that are, I'll talk specifically about high school counseling. There's the transition into ninth grade, which in a lot of ways is a lot of social and emotional counseling. There's academic advising, what we back in the day called guidance counseling, and then there's college advising. So the high school has 4 counselors. Next year, we're bringing that up to 6 counselors, specifically for this point, to address these 3 areas. So making sure that students are getting their social emotional needs met, but also someone's really making sure that their 4-year academic plan is getting them to where they want to go. And then right as they're making all those tough decisions, coming up with their list of where they want to apply, that the counselors are right there in the middle of that. And also making the connections with universities so that they know who we are once we put your child's best foot forward to the university. So we've identified this as an area where you can do better, and we're putting the resources, and probably the most significant one besides hiring some great counselors for next year, it's bringing the ratio down to where really best practice for independent schools, that's where the private school piece comes in, we're very much in line with what you'd see at any other place. So we recognize that it's a big investment, whether you're here for 1 year or 14 years, but we want to make sure that as you exit, your child has as many options as they can. You want to follow up?
Yeah, follow up on that is where are the majority of your students matriculating?
Sure. So the majority will look at the U.S., although we have a large number who also look at Canada and matriculate there. We have the ability to help students both locally, and maybe it's NYU or maybe it's American University of Sharjah, places like that. We also could help them with Europe. So we have expertise where we can, again, if they identify where they're interested, we can help them do that. Australia is another popular destination, but the vast majority are going to North America, and that's where we're positioned and where most of our attention goes. Maybe one last question, yeah.
Content versus skills.
Yes.
I understand that today is important to have rather skills than content because the content is growing fast. So whatever you learn in school will be outdated whenever they go to university.
Right.
So there is a good question. Anyway, our kids will be kind of like measured against their either skills or content.
Yeah.
How does it happen today in universities or in places where they will be kind of examined or whatever, checked?
Yeah, it's a good question. The question is around, if this makes sense, the fact that it's more about skills than it is content, what are universities doing? Universities are going through an even more dramatic change than we are. They're realizing that the graduates they're producing and they're not finding jobs, and their attention goes back onto the university saying we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars and I can't find a job. and so it's much, much more frantic than what we're dealing with. But we're measuring, our standards are really based on skills. And the way to think about content is when we design a lesson, we're saying, okay, which skills are we going to measure in this unit? So maybe it's communication skills, collaboration skills, writing. What's the content that we want to put in? So rather than just saying, here's the content, now let's practice some skills, it is, what are the skills? Okay, what kind of content makes sense to practice this? So which book do we want to read if we're going to work on our literacy skills? So skills come first, then content, but universities are having the same discussion. Now there are, of course, for many of us who went through a liberal arts experience, and in a lot of ways ASD is still a liberal arts experience because we're exposing your children to lots of different skills and subjects and content. There are still going to be, there are many universities that still have more technical degrees, engineering, things like that. And our students are very interested in that. So we're putting more of those into our experience as well. But if you can also, we have many students who are matriculating to liberal arts universities this year, and they're ready for that as well because of what we've done. But as far as what's happening at universities, I can't tell you firsthand other than it's pretty chaotic right now. Because parents are saying, why should I even send my child here if they're going to come out with a nice education but not a job? Okay. I'm going to introduce Craig Tredenik, who you probably have already met in one place, but our Director of Admissions and Enrollment. And is that okay?
It was perfect. Thank you, Dr.
Good.
Richards. Appreciate it.
All right, so
Give
thank
me
you
a
so
round of
much. And I'll see you.
Not only because he's my boss and I should do that, but he did just get off a plane less than 13 hours ago.
I'm not sure.
Excellent, and thank you. Really appreciate it. So my job is to guide you through the rest of the day, but before we do that, just on behalf of the admission team, I just want to welcome you officially and thank you for not only being here today, but just being interested in ASD. This is an exciting time, as Dr. Richards has pointed out. Whether it's bricks and mortar, whether it's programs, whether it's people, there's a lot of energy here, and having been here for a whopping 8.5 months now, everything I thought it would be, it's that and more. So there's a lot of excitement, and I don't think there's a better time for you to be thinking about joining the community. So with that, just want to poll the group briefly. How many of you are just beginning the process? Hands up. Either thinking about applying or have just applied or whatever it may be. Okay. How many have completed and are here trying to make a decision? Okay, so the pressure is on us. And some have completed, have made the decision. Thank you, and you'll be with us. Okay. We appreciate that. We've really enjoyed getting to know your families, and we're here. And part of today we recognize is a lot of tidbits and a little bit of information here and there. You're not going to get everything that you want, but that's also an opportunity for us to continue to build that relationship with you. So post today, if there's questions, if there's opportunities for us to make stronger connections between your family and the community or specific individuals and programs, we're here to do that. That's our job. A couple things before we go. The rest of the day is your choice. So we've created some sessions. If you'll take a moment, and if you've got this that you were handed at registration, does anybody not have one of these and they would like one? If the team could help pass those out briefly.